thank you so much, Lord Speaker, Baroness Hayman. It gives me, it's an honor for me to be able to speak to the members of the House of Lords, peers for the planet. As you know, I come from the Maldives, and even just last week, the swells were higher than it was the last season. The rains are more than it was the last season. The drought is drier. The wind is stronger. Our fields are inundated with the swells. The reefs are bleaching, and therefore the fish is going away. The beaches are being eroded, and we are in difficulty and distress. We just, in the Parliament, the government has submitted the budget for the next year. More than 30% of our income we spend on adaptation. And it's for water breakers, embankments, for fresh water, for a whole series of new infrastructure measures that we were never spending on before. For instance, in 2008, even in 2008, or if you go back to the 1990s, we didn't have to spend this much on concrete. But now, we are having to pay a lot. And it's very unfortunate, and it's very difficult to explain why we should take the responsibility of someone else's emission. Why we get the swells, why we have more rain, why the sun is hotter, it's very clear. UNFCCC has clearly linked bad weather to carbon emission. And so the injustice of this all is very, very obvious. But I must stress, the developed nations did not invent the internal combustion engine to harm us. The whole idea was that you have a better life, you have medicine, you have a prosperous life. But as we went along, rather recently, we found out that this was wrong. We are doing the wrong thing, but it hasn't really sunk into all of us the gravity of the issue. Now, I'll give an obvious example. The World Bank president still does not believe in climate change. And I find that really extremely comical. Now, while we spend 30% of our income on adaptation, we spend another 25% of our income on debt repayment. We took a loan to build a house, to build a school, to build a bridge, to build a road, but the bad weather has taken away the asset. The house that was built is washed away. The road is washed away, but the debt remains. We have to continue paying the debt. The assets have become unproductive. They are stranded assets. But we are having to pay back the loans still. So more than 20 climate vulnerable countries are on the brink of default, not just Sri Lanka. Yes, there is a whole lot of mismanagement and corruption and bad government and so on and so forth as reasons for default. But there is also a whole set of other reasons why countries are going into distress. I work for the Climate Vulnerable Forum. This is a group that we formed in 2009 with Prime Minister Hasina. It is now 52 countries. And we have a little office in Geneva. And our team calculated, and the IMF is not contesting this, we've lost $500 billion. We've lost 20% of possible GDP growth in the last 20 years because of bad weather. Meanwhile, we have to pay $500 billion, 20 countries have to pay $500 billion in the next 6 years for our loan repayment. And it's obviously just going to be impossible for these countries to pay. Now, the suggestion, our suggestion, our proposal is that if creditor countries would agree to swap our debt to climate resilient projects that would take us to debt sustainability, but at the same time, these projects, the byproduct, the outcome of these projects must be conservation, must be renewable energy, must be good environment projects. Now, the Climate Vulnerable Forum has done a set of country prosperity plans. So we call that prosperity plan. The idea is that you have a low carbon development strategy where there is less extraction and more recycling. Now, if countries take up these programs, then hopefully that would lead them to more debt sustainability. But for us to do this, we need the World Bank and the IMF and the developed nations to come and work with us on a debt swap. So basically, our request to the IMF, and I am asked specifically here, what should British parliamentarians request their government to do? Now, I understand Britain has a fair share of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and they make these decisions. So in debt restructuring, if we can have a debt swap as an instrument, as a prescription, then I feel that would allow us space in our budgets to the extent of 25% in the case of the Maldives, and this is the case in many, many climate vulnerable countries. And we can only do good environment projects with that haircut, or the creditor country reduces the amount of debt to the extent that we would have projects, climate, environment projects in the country. This $100 billion, it's a myth. It doesn't happen. It never happened. In 2009, I remember I was in Copenhagen. All countries, 26 countries were there. President Obama was there. Prime Minister Gordon Brown was there. A whole lot of leaders were there, and they said that they would give us $100 billion a year to overcome climate change. Now, I remember when I went to Copenhagen, this is 2009, this was the start of the financial crisis. And the British government had, before coming to COP, agreed to pay trillions of pounds to bail out this bank who had blindly invested in the wrong place. Meanwhile, developed countries were saying that they have $100 billion a year to spend on climate adaptation and mitigation. So the funds are not only not sufficient, they also never come. Maldives has got just one project from the World Bank Fund. Project funding is extremely slow, cumbersome, and full of bureaucracy. You can never get a project through the World Bank in an election circle. We come into the government, we come to government promising the people that we would do this and that. And to do that, we say, okay, we will go to a loan, go to the World Bank and get a loan. By the time we get the project, we've lost the election. So there's another whole set of other people who've come into government, and they have another set of priorities. So even the project that was approved doesn't perform. So I don't think the present business of trying to fund adaptation and mitigation efforts through these funds is working. So my request, my proposal is, let's forget about the funds and let's swap our debt to climate resilient projects. Will the creditor countries agree that they would give us a substantial haircut if we would spend that money in climate projects? And okay, that's kind of my first ask from British parliamentarians. But more importantly, will the Prime Minister please go there? I know it's very pressing and there's a lot of work to do at home. We all have a lot of work to do at home. But my father, being a trader, would always tell me, look, if you sit at home counting the pennies, you would lose the pounds. Go out and get the pounds. Well, I think if you stay at home, I know it's pressing, I know we are all in distress, there is debt, there is inflation, there is everything. But that is so insignificant compared to what is coming. The storms would be stronger. The amount of money that we would have to spend on adaptation in developed countries, we can't even imagine it. And again, if we think that it's another millimeter of concrete or another millimeter of steel that would save us, no, I think we are going it the wrong way. So I would like parliamentarians to request the Prime Minister to please come. Because again, you can't do that to Egypt also. We all went to Scotland. It was in the middle of a kind of a pandemic, but we all traveled and we all went there. And I think the decent thing would be to also come. Now, another point that we want to raise is on the science of adaptation. I won't take 2 minutes. We are spending a lot of money on building embankments and water breakers. It costs us more than $3,000 a meter to do an embankment, a water breaker, and another $3,000 to do the embankment. So 1 meter of protection, coastal protection, is costing us $6,000. We have 2,000 islands. This is impossible. But you can grow a reef I know, for $20. You can implant a mangrove in $5. But the problem with the reef and the mangrove is that it takes a lot of time. And also it's dying. So we need science into this. We need to find the new coral, the resilient coral, that will survive climate change. We want to know the DNA of that coral. We want to know more about this coral, and unfortunately we don't. We don't even have a DNA sequence for the coral, for the polyp. So we need a fair amount of science on this. We need to know what is happening to our own islands more in detail. And we need to spend our money, adaptation money, on biological adaptation, using nature as infrastructure. We must let nature come in as well. It's not always so good to brace ourselves against nature. And nature is getting more ferocious. And we do not know how high the next wave would be. If European politicians think that they can protect their people by more concrete and more steel, then I think we are going in the wrong direction. We need biological adaptation and we need mitigation. Okay, mitigation, you can't even think about 1.5. We all did above 1.5. There's no interest in any conversation that is anything about 1.5 degrees. So please switch to renewables. And the economics is now on our side. The internal combustion is old Victorian technology. It's inefficient, it's cumbersome, and the new technology, if you can't embrace the new technology, then you are not talking to the future. I am very hopeful that Britain would lead. And I've always felt that Britain would understand as well, especially understand small islands, and the difficulties that we have. I'm not actually asking for huge amounts of funds in loss and damage and say that this is for you. We are asking for reasonable economic systems, governing systems, trading systems that would benefit all of us. And hopefully we will be able to survive the years to come. We have no interest to go anywhere, and we are not going to die. We must survive. Thank you.